Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Marusha. Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And you?
Fine. I'm well,
Okay.
I'm in my hotel. I don't know if the quality, the Wi-Fi will be good.
Hello, Marusha. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you?
Fine.
Hang on.
Well,
Okay.
in my hotel. I don't know if the quality, the Wi-Fi will be
Hello,
good.
Marusha. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you?
Fine.
Hang on.
Well,
Okay.
in my hotel. I don't know if the quality. Is everything okay?
Everything's okay. Yes, now. Because I have opened, I spelled your name Marusha?
Yes. Marusha.
Okay. Okay, good, Marusha. Hello, Mr. Millers.
Hello, how are you?
How are you? Yes, I'm okay, good. And I have opened the YouTube also, so it's echoing the sound. So I have closed the YouTube, so now it's okay. And we will start in 3 minutes, Marsha. Okay.
Wow.
Will you make representation or Miller's, or how you share it?
I will share the presentation, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Cihan Bey, merhaba.
Merhaba.
Mr. Cihan Ergenç is our president of Turkish Ship Owners Association. So he will make a short opening speech before your presentation, Ms. Harush.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Mr.
Nice to meet you.
Cihan.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you also as well. İbrahim Bey, katılanlar var mı başka?
Var.
I think Miller have some kind of problem with Zoom.
You have? Do you have?
Yeah, he he told me he's not in the meeting. It's like he Zoom's stop it for him. I don't know.
For Miller Wells, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not in the meeting now. Let me check.
Okay, we can wait, yeah. Bu arada ben I will speak in Turkish and explain something, okay? In a minute. Bu arada tüm katılımcılara hoş geldiniz diyoruz. Zoom'un içerisinde altyazıları göster kısmı var. Oraya bastığınızda, altyazıları gösterdiğinizde konuşma diliniz ve altyazı dilinizi seçebiliyorsunuz. Yani tercüme yapılabiliyor, Türkçe tercüme. İngilizce konuşacağız biz bu webinar süresince ama alt yazıda size Türkçe e, tercüme yapılacak altyazıyla beraber. Eğer isterseniz o seçeneği seçebilirsiniz. Zoom'un alt tarafında CC işaretiyle altyazıları göster var. Oraya tıkladığınızda orada bir yukarı ok işareti var. Yukarı ok işaretini tıkladığınızda altyazılar ve çeviri diye bir sekme açılıyor. Oradaki çeviri kısmını açık haline getireceksiniz. Sonra da konuşma dilinizi İngilizce, altyazı dilinizi de Türkçe seçtiğinizde siz İngilizce konuştuğunuzda veya biz İngilizce konuştuğumuzda altyazı Türkçe olarak size intikal etmiş olacak. Ayrıca YouTube'dan da bu yayını yapıyoruz. Eğer hacim nedeniyle katılamayacak olan olursa YouTube'dan da canlı olarak bu yayını izleyebilir. And I think Miller Wells is in here somewhere else.
Yes, sorry about that. Thank you very much. There was some
Okay,
issues and
welcome again,
it
Miller Wells.
kicks me out of the meeting for whatever reason. So
Okay.
let's see here. We'll
Okay.
share.
I will make an opening speech, Miller Wells. So I will give this floor to our president of Turkish Ship Owners Association after my opening speech. Then we will start the presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on one of the most pressing topics of maritime industry, FuelEU Maritime and the EU emissions trading system. We are here today to discuss how these regulations are reshaping the future of shipping, driving decarbonization, and bringing the maritime sector in line with global climate goals. As you know, maybe anyone can doesn't know my name. My name is Hüseyin Çınar and Secretary General of Turkish Ship Owner Association, and I will be a moderator for this session. I'm thrilled to be joined by two highly respected experts in the field, and Marusha Heras Garcia, Head of Shipping, who brings deep expertise in maritime transport regulations and will be offering her insights into the operational aspects of FuelEU Maritime. I'm wondering about that, what you will talk and what you will present us. Miller Wells, International Maritime Manager and Carbon Market Specialist, who will be providing a broad overview of carbon market implications, compliance strategies, and the economic dimensions of these regulations. Today's session will explore a wide range of topics related to FuelEU Maritime and the EU ETS. Mr. Marusha and Miller Wells will present these topics. So it will be exciting for us. These regulations are at the forefront of a global effort to reduce the maritime sector carbon footprint. They're not only shaping the way we operate, but also influencing broader market dynamics, investment decisions, and operational strategies. So, Mr. Marusha and Mr. Wells will join us from Global Factor. After my president's opening speech, maybe you can give us some information, a little bit information about Global Factor solutions, even something like that. So I will give the floor to our president, Mr. Cihan Ergenç, for making his opening speech. Yes, please, Mr. Ergenç.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller and Mrs. Harris, for participating such a seminar, which is the hottest topic, FuelEU and EU ETS. Carbon footprint is continuing worldwide and will be the biggest challenge for regulation, procedures, calculation, procurement of carbon credits and the payments, and more regulations are becoming, and more economic we have to be. Challenges, difficulties. We are afraid that this will prolong to other nations also as well. In a way, or carbon cost or carbon tax or whatever you want to say. It's our biggest ship owners' biggest challenge is the environmental and the carbon reductions. And I said it before that this carbon issue, energy efficiency started way beyond 2010, and 2020 we got engaged. And marriage, I don't know when we will be married. 2030. When I mean marriage is when all these will be clearer. I think we have many more years before alternative solutions will be there, and beyond that it will continue. So it's really the nightmare for the ship owners. If it's not now, it will be tomorrow. I don't want to keep you all long. I want to also thank the participant who's participated. I want to thank Ms. Harris and Mr. Miller, and I also want to ask Mr. Miller to other services they are providing in the end of the day, because I know the other services and information-wise. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you to you both for the introduction. And I just want to say thank you to the Turkish Shipowners Association for letting us present today. As mentioned earlier, my name is Miller Wells. I'm the International Maritime Manager for Global Factor, and I'm joined by my colleague, Marusha Eras, who is the head of shipping for our company. So just a brief overview quickly of Global Factor and kind of some of the service we offer. So we have over 150 employees at Global Factor. We are in over 50 countries around the world. Our headquarters is in Bilbao, Spain, in the north of Spain. We are trading with over 2,000 counterparts. And we have, last year alone, we've traded over 30 million tons of carbon credits. We are also involved in the voluntary markets and guarantees of origin. So we kind of have two sides of the company. We have the consultancy side, which can help with sustainability goals, carbon footprint, kind of looking at how the company can adjust things to meet their needs. And then we have, of course, the side which I'm on, which kind of handles what we're discussing today, which is the trading side of things, which mainly deals with the EU ETS. And now we are getting started next year once FuelEU Maritime is implemented starting January 1st. We will be helping with that as well. So we offer solutions to consultancy area of sustainability and carbon footprint side of things, but also the trading scheme aspect of things as well. So I'll kind of get started regarding the FuelEU regulations specifically. So this is all part of the Fit for 55 package published by the European Commission, with the aim to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions 55% by 2030. This was kind of the ramp up or making the green transition more ambitious for the European Union. And in that included the maritime sector in not only the EU ETS, but also what is coming out next year on the FuelEU Maritime. I'm sure many of you this year have been dealing with the EU ETS since it started this January. And this year it's just 40% of the emissions of voyages made within the EU. And then, of course, if they're international voyages from non-EU countries to the EU or vice versa, it's 50% of that voyage. And so next year it will be 75% of your emissions, and then the following year it will be 100. So it's inclining kind of each year, it's increasing. And then, of course, we have the FuelEU Maritime regulations, which I will go over briefly in detail and explain kind of the differences there. So FuelEU Maritime is there to reduce the greenhouse gas intensity, and basically it is taking into account other emissions aside from just carbon dioxide. So much like the EU ETS, it enters into force next year on January 1st. We had the EU ETS enter into force this year in January. So all of that has been monitored from January to December. And then next year in September, you will have to comply with your ETS needs for 2024. And the same is going to happen with the FuelEU Maritime. You will have from January 1st to December 30th, 2025, where it is brought into force, and you will be monitoring then, and then you'll comply the following year. Much like the EU ETS, of course, this includes vessels that are 5,000 gross tons or more that serve the purpose of transporting passengers or cargo. And that is recorded using the MRV system, which is used. I'm sure you're all familiar with. The difference between the EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime is that EU ETS only takes into consideration carbon dioxide, whereas the FuelEU Maritime takes into consideration carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So these emissions have different calculation percentages depending on the types of emissions they are. So from 2030, container passenger ships that are not equipped with zero emission technologies will have to connect to the 10T network in ports and use it for all electrical power demand at berth during port calls if they are longer than 2 hours. And on the left here, you can see the intensity limit given the different years that go by and how that intensity limit increases to 80% by 2050, moving onward. So the scope of application and exemptions, basically it is the same application that we have with the EU ETS. If you do a voyage within the EU, we would say, for example, from Italy to Spain, you must cover 100% of that voyage's emissions. If you do a voyage from the mainland of Europe to the outermost regions, it's 50% of that voyage. If you do a voyage from Europe to a non-European country, for example, in the graph or the map here, we can see if you were to go from Spain to England, for example, it would be 50% of non-EU voyages. And of course, if you are at EU ports, you will have to calculate 100% of the emissions and the energy used for your berthing at port. Of course, we have over here on the side the exemptions, which are until 2029. Domestic voyages made by passenger vessels, inter-island voyages to the outermost regions, passenger vessels that are in transnational voyages, and then passenger ships operating under public service contracts between mainlands of member states and islands as well. So you can kind of see those exemptions. I'm assuming that the majority of these probably won't apply to Turkish ship owners, since most of you will be coming from other parts of the world, mainly Turkey, I'm assuming. But we wanted to include this information just for you to have as well. So we have here the compliance calendar for FuelEU Maritime. We need to keep in mind that similar to the start of the EU ETS with opening of the MOHA account, the Maritime Operator Holding account, originally that was supposed to be a 40-day process. And of course, with starting it and having everybody, doing it all at once, there was quite an administrative burden placed on the different regional authorities within the EU. So they extended that deadline and they have been flexible on it. The same thing is happening for this monitoring plan submission deadline. It was supposed to be submitted by the 31st of August and submitting it to the verifier. However, it is a flexible date, and so it's not being applied extremely strictly, but that is in place to be having that happen now. Of course, in 2025 on January 1st is when the monitoring will be started according to the plan that you've presented, and by January 31st of 2026, the following year, you will have to send your report from the previous year to the verifier. By the 31st of March, the data will be recorded in the FuelEU database. By the 30th of April, you will record the pool or the advance in the database. And by June 30th, should there be the necessity to pay the penalty, that is when compliance will be put into force, basically. So some incentives for the FuelEU Maritime. There's a deduction for ICE-class ships. They are also giving a reduction for wind-powered assisted propulsion. As you can see there, it's depending on the correlation of the coefficient of the greenhouse gas intensities, the range can be from 1 to 0.95. And then renewable fuels or non-biological origin, the use of these are incentivized as well by a factor of 2 until 2034 in the formula that's used to calculate your intensity with your greenhouse gases. So who has the responsibility for compliance? The company in the legislation means the ship owner or any organization or person such as the manager or bareboat charterer, which will assume the responsibility. Now, similar to the EU ETS, that ship owner or ISM company will depend on kind of the contractual agreements there. And then the BIMCO clauses that we have drafted are starting to take shape. Originally, they kind of were very unclear, and they were they've changed a bit. But at the moment, they're starting to kind of take shape. We don't have anything firm set with BIMCO yet that is officially going to be binding, but we will have that soon, hopefully. And in order to have that relationship between charterers having to provide, for example, depending on the type of chartering agreement that you have for the ISM company or vice versa, depending on how that is set up in your contract. And now I will pass over to Marusha to discuss the calculating of the intensity of greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Miller. Yes, I will talk about some more technical aspects. The first one is how to calculate the greenhouse gas intensity. The approach is well to wake, and you have here the formula. It's a very complex formula, and is to convert from tons of fuel consumed on board to grams of CO2 per megajoule of energy. This is the new unit. This is like comparing foods. Not all of them provide the same energy. It's not the same to eat bread than to eat fruit. And in this case, shipping will have to consume apples because they have much less CO2 emissions. As you can see here, the main variable here is fuel consumption and electricity, if it is the case. The other terms are calorific value, lower calorific value, and emissions factor, which are fixed for fossil fuels and are set for other fuels in the annex of the regulation. So more of a lot of the terms in this formula are set in an annex of the regulation. You will also have to include your tons of CO or tons of fuel consumed on board. And the result will be a quantity of grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule. This number you will have to compare with this reference. The reference is 91.16 grams for CO2. And between 2025 and 2030, you will have to reduce this number, 91, at 2%. Then a 6, a 45.5%, and so on. If you look at the formula, you have two different terms. There is a first term, which is the well-to-tank emissions. These emissions are related to the production, distribution, and transport of the fuel. This is something that we have to take into account now, how the fuel is produced. And the second part is like the EU ETS, the emissions that you emit when you burn the fuel on board. This is a different approach from the EU ETS, in which you only take into account the tank-to-wake approach. As you can see, there are two reward factors. The first one is for, as Miller said, for the use of wind-assisted propulsion. You can obtain a 5% of reduction or reward. And the second one is for the use of RFNBOs, renewable fuels from non-biological origin. These are the synthetic fuels. And there is another part here, which is that the electricity here is very rewarded, because in the well-to-tank part of the formula, you consider that electricity emissions are zero. You don't think about how this electricity is produced or distributed, and you will consider that it is zero, that this is renewable energy in all the cases. So taking this into account, this regulation promotes the use of electricity among other kinds of technologies on board. In this case, the OPS, the onshore power supply, is very promoted. And as Miller said, it is mandatory from 2030 for passengers, for passenger vessels, cruise vessels, and container ships. Next slide, please, Miller.
Mr. Marisha, can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Is this dependable for the ship types, these calculations? What you can say about that?
No. It's for all the vessels. If you have a vessels over 5,000 tons, the formula is the same.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. As Miller said, if your greenhouse gas intensity is it's more than the value established, you will have to pay a penalty. There are two different penalties for two different obligations. The first one is to use alternative fuels. So if your intensity reductions are not achieved, you will have to pay the penalty in this formula: compliance balance divided by the greenhouse gas factual. This is more or less to transform your excess in the grams of CO2 per megajoule. You will transform them in very light sulfur fuel oil, in tons of fuel oil, and you will multiply by this number, 2,400 euros. So you will pay for each fossil fuel equivalent ton a price which is 2,400 euros. This is more or less what the sanction means. There is another thing that I will have. I think it's very important that the FuelEU penalties increase in case of non-compliance for 2 consecutive periods or more. Each year, you will have to increase this penalty by a 10%. So if 2025 you don't comply, you will pay the penalty. But if in 2026 you don't comply again, you will pay a 10% of increasing. No, I see a question here. If the penalties will be paid in allowances, no. This is another rule, and you will pay in euros. This is not related to the EU ETS in this case. EU ETS is a market that exists for industry, for aviation, and now for shipping. And this is a new, complete, and tailor-made regulation for shipping. So this penalty will be paid in euros. Sometimes it's very difficult for some companies that only pays in dollars, beginning to thinking about paying in euros. This is, maybe another problem. This is a penalty.
They pay, Mr. Marcia, Ms. Marcia, where they will pay it to the states or the banking, or where
There is an administrative authority.
Yeah, administrative authorities. Okay.
Yeah, in the ETS, it depends on if you are a European shipping company, your administrative authority is the country in which you have your office. In the case of non-European companies, it depends on the number of port calls. The regulation in this aspect needs to be done. There is no document that says how the European Commission will distribute these companies in Europe, but you will be assigned to an administrating company. I suppose, honestly, to be honest, that it will be the same distribution as in the EU ETS, but you will belong to an administrating authority, and this administrating authority will have to provide you with the document of compliance to save it on board. You need this certificate to sail to Europe. So if you don't pay the penalty to, in this case, for example, Spain, you won't have this document of compliance on board. So you will be, you cannot sail to Europe. You will be with a problem.
Okay, Ms. Marcia, we have 80 companies, Turkish companies, for the Spanish authorities. Maybe you know that all Turkish companies almost are in there. So maybe we can need help for the FuelEU, something like that. Some questions maybe comes from us to you. Thank you.
We're very happy to help. We have not said, but before joining Global Factor, I was working for 15 years at the Spanish Ship Owners Association. I was there helping Spanish companies, of course, Spanish shipping companies. And because of that, we have a good relation with our administration, because I worked with them for these 15 years and now. So if in this process you have problems with this administrative authority, in the case that is Spain, please tell us. We will try to help.
Because many questions are coming to us for the Spanish administrating authorities. They encountering some problems, of course, while in this process. So we can be in touch with you, okay?
Yes, and also I would like to just point out quickly, we can also help with other administrative authorities as well. We have a close relationship with the Spanish authority, but we are more than happy to help with, in the case of the Greek authority or the Italian authority, depending on where the companies have to register in. Of course, we're in contact with everyone. We just have a very close relationship with the Spanish authority.
Okay, Mr. Miller, thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
Must be said too that regarding the EU ETS, which is not related to the FuelEU, we are in contact also with RENADE, with the provider of the maritime operator holding accounts. And I would like to say that many of you maybe are opening this MOHA account. Maybe some of you have this MOHA open, and some of you will be waiting. I would like to say that they have more than 700 companies open in the MOHA account right now, because there are not only shipping companies. As you know, you can be in this system as an ISM company or as a ship owners, and there are a lot of ISM companies that are opening 3, 4, 5 different accounts, one for each of the ship owners. So at the very beginning, there were about 500 accounts, and they have 700. So they are working hard. They are trying to open these accounts, but the process is very delayed. So you must be patient. If you have problems, you can also tell us. We will try to help you. We will be more than happy to help. But take this into account that Spain is, they are trying to fix the problem in 2024. But there are only 3 people doing all the MOJA accounts for non-European companies, and it's not easy for them. This is just to if you have some doubts, or to let you know.
Yeah, okay, it's good. It was good, yeah.
Well, coming back to the FuelEU regulation, to these sanctions, well, we will have an increase in the penalty if you are not compliant for 2 or 3 consecutive years. This penalty is different for the penalty in case that you don't comply with the regulation. For example, if you don't provide the data of your fuel consumption, the data under the MRV regulation, there is another penalty. There is another kind of punish. Well, yeah, and this is the explanation of the terms of the different numbers in the formula. 41,000 corresponds to the calorific value of the fuel, and 2,500, as I said, is the amount to be paid in euros. There is another penalty in case that ferries, passenger vessels, cruise vessels, and container ships don't comply with the obligation of connect to the onshore power supply in 2030, by 2030. In this case, you will have to pay a penalty which is 1.5 euros multiplied by your energy demand, and then the total number of hours at the port called. These penalties are very high. For a ferry, for a not very big ferry with 2,500 kilowatts in a port call of 14 hours, this penalty is almost 100,000 euros just in a port call. So it's something that people must take into account. I am conscious that maybe this is not especially ferries and maybe cruise services are not the main shipping companies in the Turkish Shipowners Association, but maybe container ships are important to take into account. Finally, this the numbers in green. This is the equivalence of the sanction. If you don't comply with this increase in the consumption of alternative fuels, you will have to pay an equivalent. This formula is equivalent to 62 euros per ton of heavy fuel oil and 39 euros per ton of marine gas oil. So if you are not compliant, you will have to estimate your consumption, and you will have to multiply each ton of heavy fuel oil or marine gas oil by these numbers, and you will have your penalty. Next slide, please, Miller. The penalties are very high. There is an example in some slides, but there are 3 different flexibility mechanisms depending on the vessel. The goal here is to try to decrease the cost of the decarbonization of entire fleet, because usually ship owners don't have only 1 vessel. They have 2, 3, 4, or 200. They don't want you to buy alternative fuels in a 2%, 6% each year. They want you to buy a new vessel, to buy, let's think a methanol or a hybrid vessel. They want you to include one of these alternative fuel vessels in your fleet. So they need a mechanism to promote the investment in new vessels, not only the buying or the purchasing of alternative fuels. We need a renewable fleet. So, well, depending on the ship's compliance, there are 3 different flexibility mechanisms. One of it is banking. In this case, if you have a ship that for the reporting period, for example, 2025, you have a compliance surplus, on your greenhouse gas intensity, you can bank this compliance and for the following reporting periods. You can save this surplus to the next year. Maybe because this year you find a fuel supplier that can sell to you alternative fuels at a good price, because one of the problems of the alternative fuels is the price, of course. One is the infrastructure to buy them, and the other one is the price. But if one year you have some surplus, you can store it to the next year for the same vessel. The other one is the borrowing. In this case, maybe you are planning not to comply this year, but to comply the next year, because next year I will be in a port that began the supply of alternative fuels. So if this year I have to pay a penalty, I can put this deficit to the next year if I know that the next year I will comply. So if my deficit this year with my surplus in the next year will sum a positive balance, I can do it. I can borrow my future surplus. This has a price, which is 10% of the quantity that I take from the next year. But this is a solution if you have plans to use these alternative fuels for the next year. And the third solution is thinking about fleets. This is the pooling. You can create an internal pooling in your company. You may use alternative fuels in just one vessel and run the other vessels with fossil fuels. And at the end of the year, you can sum the compliance balance of the different vessels of your fleet. And if the sum is positive, you can have a pool. You will need a verifier to verify this pool. You will need to put this pool in Thetis, so the administration can see the pool, can see the verifier pool, and can approve it. But you can comply. 10% of the amount which is to be paid this year. No, 10%, I suppose that this is a question about the previous slide. There is 10% of increase each year. If you don't comply in 2026, you will pay, for example, 100,000 euros. If you don't comply in 2026, you will pay this quantity plus a 10%. You will pay a 10% more. And the next year, in 2027, you will pay the penalty and a 20% more. So the penalty will increase each year by a 10%. But there is a baseline which you will pay. Well, the pool is, if you can do an internal pool with your fleet. You will have to buy alternative fuels for one of your vessels, and you will do a balance with compliant and non-compliant vessels. There is another possibility in which you can pool with vessels that are not from your company. If I have a lot of surplus, I can sell this surplus to other vessels which are not from my company to create a pool, an external pool, which is compliant. In this case, this is like a new market, which will create a new market that is not regulated. This is not like EU ETS, which is regulated by the European Commission, and we have a platform to buy allowances or to sell allowances. This is not created. This is something new, and we will see how it works. There is not a price. A lot of people say that the price will be more or less the cost of abatement of the CO2 equivalent. Of course, the limit of this price will be the penalty, because if I have to pay the penalty or pay more than the penalty, I will pay the penalty. Sorry. So yeah, this will create a kind of market between vessels that have a surplus and vessels that have a deficit. This is something that we are working with. We are talking with verifiers, we are talking with platforms, we are talking with fuel suppliers of biofuels, of course. And we will try to create pools with companies that have deficit. We will try to find the best pool for these companies to avoid the penalty. Let's see one example. Miller, please, next slide. This is a small example about a ro-ro vessel. This is a vessel of 16,400 gross tonnage in a short sea shipping route. That means that this vessel is sailing between 2 European ports. Let's think that about 70 port calls per year in each of the ports. So it will have 140 port calls in Europe each year of about 14 hours. This is a real case. We are doing economic and environmental impact of these rules for shipping companies. And this is the case of a company which is our client in the EU ETS. And we made this analysis for the FuelEU, because they are thinking about install an OPS. This is the idea. So we made this scenario using biofuel, which have 10% of bio, 10% of bio, 90% of fossil fuel, and a cost of the allowances of 75 euros per ton per allowances. Sorry, I have seen a question, but I didn't read it. Sorry.
If you want, we can maybe do the example quickly, and then I can respond to the question here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, if this company goes business as usual, there is a table here with the penalty. In 2025, from 2025 to 2029, they will pay 240,000 euros, which is high for me, at least. Between 2030 and 2034, they will pay 1,188,000 euros. From 2035 and 2039, this will be almost 3 million euros per vessel per year. So this is a very serious penalty. This is something you must take into account.
70 port calls, yes?
No, 140.
100.
But this is not about the port call. This is about the fuel consumption. For this, 8,500 tons of very light fuel oil plus 400 tons of marine gas oil import in European port. Also, for this 9,000 tons of fossil fuel, you will pay almost 3 million by 2035. So it is important. This is something that, of course, you can think Spanish companies at least are very angry with this rule, because they are small, and these quantities are not, are not easy for them, let's say. Well, one of the things that we must take into account in this regulation, as I said, that is electricity is considered renewable all times. So if you install an OPS, you will reduce a lot this penalty. If we see the tables in the lower part of the slide, you can see the baseline is the cost without OPS. So you can see the cost of the emission allowances, which is 1.5 million euros. The cost of the penalty, which is 243,000 euros, and the fuel cost, which is more or less 5 million. This is the price market right now for very light sulfur fuel oil and marine gas oil. And well, the last line is the port fee in Spain, because you can reduce your port fee if you are using electricity or alternative fuels. This is not important maybe in this case. So the cost in our baseline, which is 2025, will be almost 7 million euros. This is very important. And you will have a deficit of 101 equivalent tons of very light sulfur fuel oil. If you install an OPS, you will reduce slightly your allowances. You will only buy. There is 30,000 allowances less. You will reduce the fuel penalty from 243,000 to 170,000. So there is a slight reduction. and you will reduce these 101 tons to 71 tons of very light sulfur fuel oil equivalents. There is a huge reduction only installing an OPS. As you can see, we introduce also the cost of the installation of the OPS, which is for us, for this case, 300,000 euros to pay in 5 years. So you, in 2025, will only have 48,000 euros for the installation of this OPS. And we have also the cost of the electricity, which is almost 83,000 euros. This is the price that are currently in some Spanish ports, which is 255 euros per megawatt hour. So if you put an OPS, you will have a slightly reduction in this cost of 6 millions, almost 7 millions of 124,000 euros. And the last one is what happens if they put a B10, a 10% of biofuel. In this case, for the first years, you will increase your cost because, at least in Spain, the cost of the biofuel is, as I put them, 1,100 euros per ton. So in these first years, you will avoid the FuelEU penalty, but you will pay more in the for the full compliance. But you must take into account, this is something very important, that you will have a surplus of 240 tons of very light sulfur fuel oil equivalent. So you can pool other of your vessels, at least 2 of your vessels, if thinking about sister vessels that consumes the same quantity of fuel, you will pool with this vessel 3 of your vessels, and you can avoid, next slide, please, Miller. You will avoid this penalty with your 3 vessels if you pool them with this surplus of tons. So it is important to obtain some surplus to pool your vessels, because with this 110 in red, you will avoid this 245 of the penalty of a vessel pooled with you. So this is something very interesting in this regulation. The idea of, if you invest in biofuels or in alternative fuels, you will pool other vessels in your fleet and you will avoid the penalty for some vessels. So in the end, you will decrease the compliance cost. I don't know if it is clear, but I hope. And this is more or less the case. This is what you must have in mind, that you need to do your estimations, you need to think about your fleet, you need to think about the possibilities of buying biofuels, or the OPS, if you want to, if this is the case. But this is important to take into account all the costs here, and to know that that pooling can be good for the company if you do the correct pool.
Marisha, do you have a calculator on your own for the companies to calculate these complex formulas?
Yes, of course, we have a tool, because it's very difficult. We have a tool that can do all these estimations more or less easily. Yeah, and it takes into account another thing in Spain, which is when you are traveling from Spain to Canary Island, because these voyages are exempted until 2030. So you can calculate the impact of these voyages, which are exempted some years and then they will be included. So yeah, we can do this, because in Spain it's a very important, in Spain and in Europe, and for all of you, it's an important problem. Well, I think it's done.
Yes, and now we have here in the questions. One of the questions was, how and when do you anticipate the development of agreement templates for pooling arrangements? And what are your expectations regarding the pricing structure in these agreements? So just the thing is, with the development of these agreements is a bit complicated right now, because many companies don't want to commit to anything until they have their information verified by a verifier, because you don't want to sign an agreement with a company that thinks it will have a surplus, and then in reality, once everything is verified, they have less than what they thought, and then the pool is off. So people are a bit timid to just join the pools straight away. They're waiting for that information to be verified. So I would say I am assuming that most likely at the beginning of next year, we will start to see templates and kind of agreements coming out that will have pooling arrangements. And in regard to the pricing structure, it's a market that's going to be developed out of nothing, basically. So there's nothing to go based off of currently to kind of determine what the pricing structure would be for the pooling and that kind of aspect of things. So that's another thing. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait. We don't have anything to compare to at this time. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Marusha.
Yeah, we have some contact with these platforms and fuel suppliers, and they are thinking about, as I told you in one slide, that the price of the penalty was about 62 euros per ton if you were using heavy fuel oil. And they told us that a very first approach could be selling this surplus by 20 euros per ton. This is what they think the market could be. Because of course, if you have to pay the penalty, which is 62, and someone offers 60, it's not a very competitive price in a market. But of course, if you have some surplus, you want the best possible price. But they think, but this is their expertise. I really don't know. I would like to see the market, and I will wait. They think that 20 euros per ton per this ton of equivalent fuel oil could be a price. So this is something you can take in mind. Is 62 the penalty, 20 to buy a ticket for the surplus. This could be an idea. You must take into account that nobody is going to offer you this 2,400, because maybe I prefer to pay the penalty than to do a lot of agreements and then a pool and then verify the pool and pay a verifier. So the price must be competitive. But we will see how the market works.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions to Marisha and Miller-Wells from audience? Okay. If you have any questions, you can write there the question parts. Marisha, I will have a questions for ships under 5,000 gross tons. Will also start submitting their data as of January 2020. So what kind of preparations should they make in this regard? Do you have any idea about that, or Miller-Wells?
Well, they will be included under the MRV. I suppose that will be like in the EU ETS, that the small vessels will have to notify during some years under the MRV regulation to learn how to do it, to introduce this process in the daily life. And then they will be included in the market, and they will be included. So no, my advice would be like with IMO, work in energy efficiency, try to reduce the emissions, at least from 2025 to 2030, work hard in the energy efficiency systems, and then try to find these fuels, these biofuels, and then alternative fuels. But Spanish companies, at least, and some of European companies that we are talking with, the focus is that we are not going to pay these super expensive fuels, not at least a lot of these fuels. We are going to try, we are going to buy, we are going to try these fuels on board to see what happens, to see how the crew can deal with it. But the approach is to wait maybe until 2030 and try to comply using a small quantity of biofuel and energy efficiency measures, because this fuel is not easy to find. In Spain, you have to call your fuel supplier with 15 days in advance to have the fuel at time. So, well, it's not easy. One of the problems that it's not easy to find this biofuel. So, yeah, maybe you won't have.
Yeah. I have prepared some questions for you, so I will ask
Fantastic.
to you. Could the digital tools or better monitoring systems play a role in ensuring compliance with the emission targets? What do you think about that? For example, we made a marriage with strategic marriage. Maybe Mr. Cihan Ergenç can explain this. We made a strategic marriage with StormGeo, so we are trying to make our compliance with the emission targets with the digital tools. What do you think about that? What do you think
I was
digital
thinking
tools for compliance, FuelEU? Yes, I know for EU ETS compliance, yes, it's very useful. But what do you think about the technical side, the FuelEU side?
I think they are very important. They have a role to play, these tools. There are some companies that have the tailor-made tools to see this compliance on a real time. And I think that is something that is really good, because you now with the tools that the market provide, you can see not only your EU ETS compliance and your FuelEU compliance, you can see your CII. So you can see all your parameters. You can see if the vessel must increase or reduce the speed. That usually is reduced, of course. You can see the full performance of your vessel, because you have to take into account that it's not only Europe, it's also IMO, and the midterm measures that will be in place maybe in 2028, and they will give us new the DCS with more data, with more. So a digital tool can be very helpful, of course.
I think IMO is coming also in the 2027.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think about the carbon leakage? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, in Spain, ports are very angry. As you know, the port of Algeciras is close to the port of Tangier, so they are let's say they are very angry with the Commission, and they are trying hard to avoid this carbon leakage.
Yeah.
The cruise industry is also thinking about include new port calls in the north of Africa, just not to go from Italy to Spain and to Greece, just to introduce a stop by in another countries. So this is something that is going to happen. When I was in ANAVEC, this is something that we fight a lot to avoid this change.
Yep.
But it's not easy, and the Commission is not was not aligned with us. So this is what we have. We have a carbon leakage measure for container ships regarding Tangier. These port calls are not taken into account in the MRV. But of course, it's something that is going to happen. So let's see. There is a revision of these rules by 2027, I think. And they will see if this carbon leakage is dangerous or not. The Commission say that it's not going to happen. The industry is saying that it is going to happen. So let's see.
Also, I think we have some fuel certification systems are coming for EU regulations. So next time, maybe we could talk about the fuel certifications, because those are really important, I think, because I'm studying and I'm reading some documents about that. So they are coming to us very hard, very strongly. So next time, maybe it could be our subject for that if we have a meeting in Turkey or in a webinar, something like that. Also, we are interested we have many interests about the auction system, how it works, how can we buy, where can we buy, what about the regulations about that. So next time, if you have a time, maybe we can talk about in our next webinar. So I see there's no question, and I ask some questions and I take good answers about that. It will be very delightful for us. Would you like to say, Leslie, before closing the webinar?
Thank you very much. We will be more than happy to explain you the auction system for the EU ETS, and of course to talk about the proof of sustainability for these new fuels, which is very important. This is something in which Europe is working.
Yes,
now,
fuel.
Yeah, there are some proof of sustainability from the ICCS, CCT. I don't remember exactly the name. ICCT, I think. So yeah, this exists. This is something that fuel suppliers are working on, and we can talk about this proof of sustainability because they will be very important. And this is something that you can obtain not only buying fuels in Europe. You can obtain that in any port of the world if the fuel supplier has this proof of sustainability. They are international. This is an international scheme, so it is very interesting that you can buy these fuels in Singapore or in Nador or in Rotterdam or wherever. So this will be the base also for IMO, for the IMO system, for this like FuelEU maritime regulation at IMO level. So yeah, this is very, very relevant. Sure, but we will be happy to discuss, there with you or in another webinar. Thank you.
Okay,
Milvas, do you have any last
yes. Thank you so much. Yes, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for joining today, and thanks for having us. Looking forward to seeing you guys soon. I will be traveling to Turkey regularly, so if anyone would like to meet in person to discuss any of these kind of questions that you have on any of the regulations for the FuelEU or the ETS, I'm more than happy to set up meetings and to kind of help, and of course reach out via email if we need to schedule a call anytime, or you have any questions you want to ask via email. If that's easier, I'm more than happy to kind of help with as much as we can. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending today's insightful discussion on FuelEU Maritime. Thank you for Global Factor. And thank you, Marisha. Thank you, Miller. Next time we will see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
I'm closing the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bakıyorum.